welcome to my legislative report. I'm State Representative Julie Harhart of the 183rd District in Lehigh and Northampton counties. On today's program, we'll be learning about the state's archives. In addition to housing some of our Commonwealth's most treasured historical documents, the Archives building in Harrisburg is open for citizens to research topics of interest, including their own family histories. I am honored to have our state archivist, David Carmicheal, as my guest today. He is here to highlight the collections of the state archives and to help us understand its value to all Pennsylvanians. Mr. Carmicheal, welcome to my program.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here as well. I'm really excited about this show because, as I said when we were talking privately, that I knew we had an archives here in Harrisburg, but really not familiar with it. So can you tell me where is it located, and a little bit about what your job is? And
sure.
I also know we can touch about some of the things that are in my district.
Sure.
But explain to us really, where is the archives and what exactly does the archives hold?
Sure. We are in a very tall white tower in Harrisburg. Anyone who's driven through Harrisburg has probably seen this tall windowless building that sits beside the State Museum.
Oh, yeah.
And people are always asking, well, what's inside that tall tower there with no windows? And that is the State Archives. And one reason it has very few windows is to protect the documents that are inside it. And I like to say that the State Archives identifies any document that the state government makes that has to be kept forever. And then we keep it forever, and we preserve it forever. And it's not, obviously it's not many documents every year. Only about 4 or 5% of all the documents we create have to be kept forever. But usually they have great legal value to the state. For instance, we have the records that show where the boundaries of the state fall.
Oh.
We don't want to lose track of that.
No, we do not.
So we keep that forever to make sure of that. We have William Penn's charter from 1681 that created the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and all the laws that you pass and the governor's signs come to the State Archives to be preserved forever. And so you can think of us sort of like in your own home. You get a lot of paper, and you pay your water bill, and you might keep it a while and then throw it out.
Right.
And that's what the state does. But some things you keep forever, like birth certificates and marriage records and things that have great meaning to you or legal value, and that's what the State Archives does.
Great. And how long have you been doing this?
I have been doing this 1 year and 1 day in Pennsylvania. Yesterday was my first anniversary as the State Archivist in Pennsylvania.
Oh.
I was the Archivist of Georgia for about 12 years before I came here.
Okay.
And before that, I was in Westchester County, New York, which I now refer to as the other Westchester, now that I'm in Pennsylvania. But I've been doing this about 30 years as an archivist. And I love Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania's history is the history of the nation. And so when I see the documents in the Pennsylvania State Archives, I'm seeing really the documents that established the nation and all of the things that the nation went through. When you look at Pennsylvania, you see things like the American Revolution. We have records in the archives on that. The Civil War, obviously, we have many records there on that. But the industries, the canals, the railroads, we have large railroad collections in the archives. The highways that we have, and so much of this is a history of the country.
You know, and then even in my area, I mean, throughout Pennsylvania, I think in different pockets in different areas, and even in the area that I live, there's an awful lot of history there. I've done some legislative reports on that to, bring out what we have and some of the beautiful gems, should we say, that we have just in the Lehigh Valley.
That's right.
So, yes, you're right. Pennsylvania is a beautiful state.
Yes.
And welcome to it.
Thank you. I love it here.
Tell me, how do people use the archives, and what do they come to look for in the archives?
We have a lot of different kinds of researchers who come. Many of our researchers are family historians. And any of your viewers who want to come to the archives, we're open Wednesday through Saturday from 9 to 4. And they can just walk in and use the archives.
They do not have to make an appointment?
No appointment necessary. On Saturdays, we do not bring original records out of the tower. because of our staffing levels are lower on Saturday. But on Wednesday through Friday, they can see original records. We also have many reels of microfilm they can look at if they can't get to the original record on Saturday. So a lot of family historians, a lot of legal researchers, because we have legal documents, obviously, that protect the Commonwealth, so they come. A lot of the state agencies come and use the archives. They will look for reports that they issued 20, 30 years ago. One recently, they were looking for a report on the avian flu, which of course is a current issue, and 30, 40 years ago, it struck Pennsylvania, and they had done studies, and so they wanted to find those in the archives. A lot of the people who come to the archives are looking for military records, and we talked before we started here on why military records are so important.
Yes.
So we have military records that go back to the beginning of Pennsylvania and come up through Vietnam. We are about to transfer some from Desert Storm into the archives. Many times people are using these records to demonstrate that they are eligible for benefits. It might be a pension of some sort. It might be a burial benefit that a veteran is eligible for. And so they'll come and use the records. And in the 70s, the federal government record center that held the military records burned. And so they can't go to the federal government quite often. And in fact, every week, the federal government contacts us to help prove military service. Yesterday, we had 3 of them in one day from the federal government asking for proof of military service. And I do have one here to show you that I thought you might want to see. And I'm going to send you a copy of it after the show. But it's someone you might know. And this is an application for World War II compensation.
Oh, for goodness sake. Yes, I am familiar with the name and the person. That's my dad. Yes, World War II. This is saying that it's something with compensation?
He's applying for a bonus that he received for serving in World War II. And he had to apply for the bonus. And if you turn it over, you'll recognize some other names on there as well.
Yes, my grandmother.
And
myself. Yeah, myself and my sister.
That's right.
They were on here as well, and my mother. How about that? So this is in the archives. I mean, did he apply? Did he ever get his bonus?
As far as I know, he did receive the bonus. And that was the application for the bonus. We have many thousands of those. And again, people will use those to prove service, but as you can see how it'd be very valuable for family history research.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's amazing. How about that? My family's in the archive.
Forever and ever.
Forever and ever. That's really amazing.
So people can come and use these records in the building, in the archives, but we're making a lot of effort to put them online so that people can use them on the internet.
Would there be a reason why, let's say, well, he's deceased now, but would there ever be a reason that we'd ever have to recall this from the archives? I mean...
It would not, there's nothing necessarily that it would have to be recalled from the archives. If someone needs a copy for a legal reason, we certify a copy,
okay.
and then it's a legal document at that point.
I see.
So once something comes into the archives, it stays there forever, we hope, and does not leave, so that future people can use it.
Oh my goodness, how old this document is. I shouldn't tell you.
You notice I didn't mention what your age was on there, so nobody will ever know.
Oh my goodness. And it's in really good shape.
It is in good shape.
So is it difficult to keep these records in good shape?
If we get them when they're in good shape, we can preserve them in good shape. And I like to say we don't collect old records at the archives. We collect permanently valuable records. And if I can get them while they're new, then I can easily preserve them for a very long period of time. If they're worn and torn when I get them, it's hard to keep them alive for hundreds of years. Our biggest challenge right now is not with paper documents. I can put this in a folder, acid-free folder, and put it in temperature and humidity control and come back in 100 years and it will still be there. Electronic records are the big issue today, and you all are creating a lot of electronic records. And if I put that on a disk and I go away for 100 years and come back, I won't find a machine that can read the disk. There won't be software that can read the document. And so electronic records are our big challenge. And we do have a digital archives that we're developing right now to store electronic records, but that's a little more difficult challenge for us.
Well, that's progress, you know.
It is.
So they say. It has its, you know, handicaps too.
That's
so.
right, it does.
Are there people allowed to come and see the documents at the archives? And I think you did touch upon that they can walk in. They do not need an appointment.
That's
so
right.
If they need something, they could come to Harrisburg, go to this big, tall, white building,
That's right.
walk in.
Walk in, and we have very friendly people there to help them. People
How many actually work there?
The entire staff of the archives is about 30.
30 people?
And only about 4 of those actually work with the public. I kind of compare it sometimes to a diner. The reference staff is the wait staff, and there's a lot going on in the kitchen that you don't see. So we have people who work with state agencies and with the legislature and with other people to make sure we get the records. If we don't get the records, there's nothing to serve in the reference room. Let me go back a second though and mention again that we are doing a lot to get things online so that people won't have to come to Harrisburg to see them. And we have about 8 million records online right now, and we did this through a partnership with Ancestry.com, and they scan these records at no charge to the taxpayers, and they are free to all Pennsylvanians. You just have to come in through the archives website, and then it will get you into Ancestry for the Pennsylvania records. And so people can even research without leaving home.
I know that we have a lot of, well, we do a veterans outreach, and I hear this, a lot of veterans come in and they say, you know, I did not get my medals. How can I retrieve my medals?
Right.
And we always say it's a federal issue. Now, if they would come in and if I would say, did you ever go to the archives in Harrisburg or look it up online in the archives in Harrisburg, it could be very possible.
Absolutely.
Because of that fire that you mentioned
Absolutely.
before. This is why this problem is occurring.
Yes, and we would love to help them. And if we can't find it, we can often point them in the right direction to find it. So we would love for you to refer them to us.
Well, that's good, because then that's cutting one piece of red
That's right.
tape there. I'm just going directly to the source.
That's right.
Also with local governments, what do you do, or what kind of documentation do you have to preserve for local governments? How do you help them?
One of the big things we do for local governments is we do disaster backup for their vital records.
Okay.
So, and we still do it in many cases on microfilm, because microfilm is a very good disaster backup medium. You can store it and it will last for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so we have 230,000 reels of microfilm from counties that we store
Wow.
to protect them. And they are copies of their most essential records, so that if something happens to their birth and marriage records, things like that, and their court records and such, we have the backup for them. And so that's a big function of what we do. We also keep microfilm copies of a lot of county records in our reference room, so that people can come there and do their research on certain county records. And we have about 20,000 reels of county records in our search room. So that's an important function. The other thing we do is go out and train them about how to keep records efficiently. One of the things the State Archives focuses on is what has to be kept and what can be thrown away. Because if we can throw away all the stuff we don't need to keep, and you don't do it right away. I mean, we determine a record has to be kept 7 years and then thrown away, or
Right.
50 years and then thrown away. But if we can help agencies and local governments do that, then they get rid of the records they don't need to keep, and it just increases their efficiency, it lowers their storage costs. And so we do a lot of work with local governments on that sort of thing.
How do they access you? Do they know this? I mean, do they know that you will come out and do this?
They do, and we work through many of their associations, like sheriff associations and other kinds of municipal associations.
PATS
right.
Okay.
All of those things. One of the functions of the archives, in addition to keeping the permanent records of the government, is we also work with state agencies to store the records that they have to keep for a while but can eventually throw out and destroy. And so we have a big warehouse also where we keep hundreds of thousands of boxes of records that have to be kept for a while but then can be destroyed. And so again, we helped state agencies be much more efficient. Instead of keeping it in their office, they can send it to my warehouse. We keep it safely, securely, we send it back to them if they need it, and then at the right time, we destroy it. And so we have 270,000 boxes of records that we store for state agencies as well.
Wow. Anything stored for my local areas? Has there anything been, put in the archives from like the district that I represent? Because I represent a lot of the local governments, townships, and boroughs.
You do, and I brought a couple along. We have thousands of documents that probably that cover areas in your district. The first one I brought is, and I have to read my descriptions because I don't memorize all of these. We have 250 million documents. This is a 1735 survey of 35 acres along the Lehigh River. It was called the Indian Tract. And we don't know why it was called the Indian Tract, but we think that obviously it was probably owned by Native Americans and then purchased from them. And it's near Walnutport.
Okay.
So that is in your district. The land was later sold by the Penns to individual landowners. And that's...
Well, I do know at one time, if my history serves me correct, they did have Indians, Indian wars actually that took place. Up in that area. We have an Indian land church where it was burned down by the Indians and now rebuilt. It's 250 years old, so maybe that's why it's, the Indian Trail.
Must have been where they were.
But that is really old. That is certainly old.
Just about every piece of property in Pennsylvania probably traces back to a document in the archives in some way, because we have the records back from the very beginning. And so when the Penns sold the land and divided it up, we have the documents that show they sold the land to this person who then divided it and sold it to more people. And it traces right down to today. If you had to trace all the way back, it's the State Archives that probably has the record.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dr. Carmicheal, or Mr. Carmicheal, we're going to take a quick break, and then we will return to legislative report, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you know that Fort Indiantown Gap, located in Lebanon County, is home to Pennsylvania's only Veterans Memorial? C.J. Frederick of Westchester, Bucks County, submitted the wooden design that now honors those men and women who have sacrificed their lives in defending this great country. Dedicated to the Commonwealth on October 7, 2001, the Veterans Memorial is surrounded by freestanding walls and houses an amphitheater, which can accommodate large crowds during an event. Strategically placed in the front of the amphitheater is a tomb that reminds visitors of those who gave their lives protecting the freedoms of this nation. The design suggests a war-damaged structure in which Frederick wanted to impress upon those visiting the horrific arena of war. Now you know. Did you know that Act 16 of 1999 honors one of the greatest leaders in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives? The Matthew J. Ryan Legislative Office Building, once known as the Capitol Annex, is located next to the main Capitol building and honors the late Speaker of the House, Matthew J. Ryan. Those who visit this building will observe the magnificent architectural designs providing eloquence and grandeur to the building. Known as one of the greatest members in the history of the Pennsylvania State House, Matthew Ryan started his career in the legislature in 1963 and was elected Speaker in 1981. His charisma and knowledge will forever be reflected in the building now named after this great legislative leader. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. I'm State Representative Julie Harhart. My guest today is State Archivist David Carmicheal. Welcome back again. I know we were talking about the local governments and the documents that are preserved, and we looked at one document that was in my district, which would be the Walnutport area.
And here is another. This is the Slatington Water Company.
Wow.
This is their incorporation paper.
Incorporation for the water company. And this was March 6, 1861. They actually had a water company in 1861.
They did in 1861.
Wow.
It's amazing when you look
through. I wonder what that looked like. I mean, a water company in 1860, a lot of wells or?
Well, you know, I don't know what this particular one looked like. There have been water companies for a very long time in America, and the earliest water pipes were logs that were hollowed out and laid end to end and sealed from end to end. So I don't know that they did that here. But it's interesting when you look at these incorporations, you can see how industries moved across the state. And, you know, water companies were being formed. You can see the movement westward. And 1861 would have been the time that part of the state was beginning to build these things.
And obviously, certainly had to lay pipe and,
Yes.
you know, put pipe down in
Yes.
order to access the water. So, yeah, this really is truly amazing. And it just, I mean, I can't believe, just hold that up there, how, really how old it is, but yet how well preserved and intact it is.
Yes.
It's really, that's really amazing. So Slatington, 1861, you had your first water company. How about that? There you go. I don't want to destroy
We'll
it.
put that over here.
I could, I could do that very easily.
So one of the things I also like to mention is that we don't, as I said, we don't just collect old records. And here's it's fairly recent, 1974, but this also is a local government record. It's the annual budget for Northampton Borough.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
And it's interesting to go back and see what the budget was like in the 70s, obviously.
Oh my, I don't think much has changed. You know? Well, this is amazing. What were their taxes? How?
Yes, you can probably find it in there somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. Yes. Well, this is great. Look at this, the annual budget report and guide, and this is for the Borough of Northampton.
So they would have had to file this with the state, and then it becomes a permanent record. And if it's a permanent record, it comes to the state archives.
And it has all its, a regular budget with all its expenses, has the employee benefits, insurance, all the general service budget item, snow and ice removal. This is really amazing, 1974. There you
I will
go.
say, when I was State Archivist of Georgia, we didn't have snow and ice removal in our town budget, so this is a little different for me. But
Yeah, well, we had some hefty snowfalls,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
throughout the years, and I remember growing up, we really, you know, we had a lot of snow, and nobody ever complained. Now everybody complains about snow and cold.
I grew up in Ohio, and I never complained about the snow then either, but now I do. So that's something to do with
Is it
my
an
age.
age? I was just going to say, is it an age
For
thing?
me, it's an age thing.
That is absolutely amazing. That really is.
So let me mention a couple of other ways that the State Archives has been used recently. We had a teacher whose proof of service was lost. And I don't know if she had a house fire or something like that, but she had reached the point where she needed her pension and had no proof of her service. And again, the State Archives had the records from the school, and we were able to prove her service. We had another recent visitor who was an older gentleman who had a childhood disease, and he had to prove that he was diagnosed as a child. And we had the hospital
wow.
records, and we were able
Wow.
to prove that he was diagnosed. So there are a lot of practical uses. We're trying more and more to get the records into schools through digital images, through original documents, because I think when students see the original documents, history sort of comes alive to them in ways that it doesn't when it's just in a textbook. So a lot of practical uses that we're putting the archives to.
This is really very enlightening to me.
I'm glad.
Seriously, it really is. I know in October you had an American Archives Month, and I don't know if, I think you mentioned that, but I'm not sure. And I understand that on the 1st you had Ask an Archives Day.
Yes.
What,
We did it through Twitter.
so you, in other words, ask what Archives Day is. People could ask you on Twitter, and you would just send your response back?
On Twitter.
So-
They could ask any question.
Any question?
Yes.
So, and that would be anything that, any events or, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, are there any other events coming up on Archives Month besides the Twitter? Are you doing anything special?
We have an exhibit right now in the State Museum. We're not part of the State Museum, but we have some space in the State Museum, and we have an exhibit on what's inside the archives. And it's just selected documents. One of the documents we're exhibiting is Pennsylvania's Act of Gradual Abolition of Slavery from 1780. And a lot of other documents we have an exhibit there, so we're doing that. And we do have a series of events. People can check our website. It's pastatearchives.org, and they can check our website and see what's coming up. But we try to do events every few months. We have some sort of an event.
That's really neat. I didn't know that either. Now tell me, do you have any personal favorites among the documents that you have stored there?
I do.
Do you?
My grandmother grew up in Bellefonte, and so just about any document that dates from around the turn of the 20th century in Bellefonte, I love, of course. And I have found some of my own ancestors in our records, of course. And so I love those. And I love the legislative records, actually, the acts of the General Assembly, because I think, you know, it reveals what was on people's minds at different times and what issues they were dealing with. And what I'm always amazed at is that nothing ever changes. You know, we were talking about the same issues, you know, the liquor control board, we can go back and show you countless times that it's come up and been discussed. And the same is true about, you know, taxation and all kinds of things.
And property tax reform
Right,
and all
right.
that, yes.
And so I find that fascinating, that we're discussing the same issues, but we're approaching them different ways over the years. So I love all those records.
I still can't get those issues resolved. That's the most amazing.
They often didn't resolve them in the past either. So
I know, that's why we're still.
That's right, that's right.
Well, that's why we're still doing them.
You shouldn't feel too badly then,
No,
because
I won't.
for 100 years. You know.
So the bills that I have sponsored, prime sponsored, and were acted in law are in your archives?
They are in the archives.
So maybe 100 years from now, somebody will say, "Oh, Julie Harhart, yeah."
They will.
I think she was a state rep, you know,
will.
back in our area.
They will, and they will still be preserved 200 or 300 or 400 years from now. So
Wow.
they'll be there for people to see.
Great. And citations, do they store the citations that we give out? Do they store those in the archives?
Those do not always come with the acts, okay? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So there, it's not quite as often. The House citations, I believe, are stored in the legislature archives. There's a separate House archives. And I believe they store many of those as well. So they're probably preserved.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, that's good, because I always tell people that they're forever in, you know, our archives by presenting them that citation. So.
I think you're safe in saying that.
Good. Now, if someone in the family has a document that they want to preserve and pass down through generations, what tips would you offer for keeping them in good shape?
I'll give you a couple quick tips. With
We
the
have 2
time left
minutes,
here.
so.
Okay, all right. So firstly, don't store them in attics and basements. Keep them in the rooms where you live, because documents like to be in good temperatures and humidities, and attics and basements are not good for that sort of thing. Keep them in a clean environment. So we always recommend put them in acid-free folders, acid-free boxes, keep them in a clean area. If you're going to display them, maybe display a copy rather than the original. Strong light will fade a document very, very rapidly. Just think of your newspaper laying on the stoop and it turns brown. So those are the key things. Keep them in your living areas, keep them clean, and keep them out of the strong light.
Good advice.
All right.
I think I'll take that too, because I have lots of, you know, well, not a lot, but, you know, documents that I like to really preserve and hand down to my daughter. And
Sure, you have your own archives.
I have my own archives. There you go. You're right, I do.
You do.
That's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Julie Harhart. If you need assistance with any state government matters, please feel free to contact me at my local office. The address and number will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.